So what we've laid out in front of you is a cul-de-sac situation here. It is probably the most complicated, difficult job a motor grader operator can be asked to do. And that is to grade this ready for asphalt as fast as he can, as accurately as he can, and do not damage the curb and do not damage the machine. That is his role. And we have in the John Deere, we have Rick Valenzuela, over 30 years of experience. Many of you know him from past Deere years. Mark Johnson, product consultant. I'm Clark Miner, product consultant. Mark also has well over 25 years in a CAT and another 6 years here at John Deere. He is no beginner. And their goal here is to show you what the machines are about.
And you're going to notice immediately when you watch in these cameras, which are placed strategically so it shows you the same view in each machine, what he is going through. They do not have hard hats on. I want to bring that to your attention. And the reason they don't is they blocked the camera. So we asked for permission to not wear hard hats on this particular demo. We ask you to please respect our request that on all other stations you do wear a hard hat when operating on this site. It is a requirement, and we'd appreciate if you would honor that. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick because he's going to talk you through this and tell you what he's looking at. Now, whoever is talking is who you see on the screen. Michael's going to be switching that. Rick, turning it over to you, please.
Thanks, Clark. Right before I get started here, I wanted to address one of those myths that Clark mentioned earlier. Caterpillar has been advertising that by using joystick controls, you reduce your hand and wrist movement by over 78%. They actually print this in their brochures. Well, why don't you, I just want you to be the judge of that. Watch our hands, watch how much movement each one of us makes, and see who has less hand and wrist movement. But as I start, I am working my way up to the curb. You can see right now that when I need to look at the heel of my blade, I just have to move my head. Now, this first straight run allows me to line up on the curb and get pretty well set up to minimize the amount of handwork that I leave for the laborers, the people who have to come in behind me to get this final cleanup against that curb. But this radius that I am approaching right now, you can see my front end is just about there. That is one of the busiest spots of this cul-de-sac. I have to use multiple functions. I have to steer, I have to articulate around this this curb or this radius here, all while holding grade. You can see a lot of times I'm glancing over to my left side to look to see where the heel is at to make sure I maintain grade. Now, as I come around the inside radius here, I have to articulate the opposite direction, keep the blade up against the curb, and watch my grade. This is a lot tougher than it looks, but the control of the machine is such, or the fingertip controls is such that it really makes it pretty easy. Now, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here. I'm circle side or blade side shifting and circling all at the same time to try and keep the material from spilling off the toe of the blade or the leading edge onto the curb. Now, when I first started practicing for this, I thought I may have to use the steering wheel because the lever steers, they're just a little different technique involved with the lever. But as you can see, the metering is good on the lever steer, and I never did have to use the steering wheel to keep tight against the curb. I'm to the point here where I'll let Mark go ahead and start his pass, and he can explain to you what he's doing. Mark?
Okay, thank you, Rick. Good morning, guys. I'd like to welcome you into the cab of the CAT 140 all-wheel drive M2 series motor grader. Of course, we've all heard one of the reasons for the M series is the visibility. And what I'd like you to do is look out this right-hand side of my mow board and look at my cutting edge and the curb. As you can see, I've got tremendous visibility to the toe of this mow board. But what I'd really like you to pay attention to is the left side of my mow board. As you can see where I'm sitting, I've already lost visibility due to this joystick, my hand, GP or the cross slope controls, and the B post. In order for me to actually see the heel of my mow board, I would have to run this whole cul-de-sac leaning forward like this. So for the purposes of this demo, I'll sit back so you guys can look over my shoulder and watch what I'm doing here. Now as I come through this same radius, I'm going to have to take my hand off the control, shut off the cross slope system. But as I articulate, I really want you to pay attention to how far I have to move these controls in order to operate this machine. The metering is not as refined as some of the machines they've produced. Now I'm going to come around and articulate now to the left, and I really find it difficult as I'm doing these torsional movements to try and manipulate some of the controls that I have to use my thumb, and so it limits the amount of implements I can use at one time. The other thing I found interesting was in order for me to change my cross slope, for example 1%, I'm going to have to take my hand off this very vital joystick steering and go to this control, and it takes me up to 10 seconds just to move this 1%. As you can see, obviously I can't take my hand off that control for that long. So in changing a lot of my cross slope and GPS functions, I'd have to stop the machine and make those changes. So I'm coming up on Rick here, and we're going to turn it back to him.
Thanks, Mark. Now, as I move on here, I can glance back at my tandems and tell that I'm just a little bit closer to the curb than I'd like. So what I do is I just change my angle of articulation a little bit, change my blade angle, and try and keep that the tandem out of the curb. As I come around this part of the curb, it's very easy to see exactly what I need to see, because I can look ahead of the blade and right behind the front tire, and I can see everything I need to see. I can line up on the curb and actually get a pretty darn close to where I need to be to minimize the amount of handwork. Now, as I come around this radius here, this is just like that radius right on the other side. It gets real busy because I have to articulate in the opposite direction right there. And if you can see the controls, all I have to do is reach over with my forefinger to articulate the machine. It's really pretty simple. There's not much overall hand movement required to do that. I can steer back into the straight portion of the curb once my machine gets around that radius and I'm clear of the curb there. I reach over and I hit return to straight, and it just straightens me right out, and it's really been a good feature on this grader. So I'm at the easy part of the cul-de-sac, so I'll go ahead and turn it back to Mark. Mark?
Okay, thanks. While I'm kind of pointed towards the crowd, what I would like you guys to do is pay attention to these front tires. Now I'm trying to maintain a nice, steady pressure against this curb to clean out the dirt. But you notice the metering on this steering is such that I get a lot of wandering. What happens is I make an input, and I don't have a lot of refinement in that movement, so I'll make a reaction, and then I have to make a slight adjustment. Reaction and a slight adjustment. So it's gets a lot of wandering with that front axle. Now, the important part about this, if I was actually preparing this for paving, every time I pull away from the curb with that mow board, that's an area that I am out of specs. And I'm either going to have to come back here with the motor grader, or I'm going to have a laborer come back and fix that. And I've found out here at Sacaton Acres, I am that laborer. So I'm going to really try pretty hard to maintain that a real tight fix against this cul-de-sac. Now here we come to, again, this very hard part of probably the hardest part of a cul-de-sac. I'm articulated to the left, and now I'm going to try and smoothly change my articulation and get this machine articulated to the right. Now, one of the problems, you can see not only the metering, but it's very easy for me to do what is called crosstalk. So as I articulate, I sometimes will actually, and in fact I did it right there, I've lost my grade, got a little high there. So sometimes it's very difficult, especially with these torsional moves on the joystick, is to maintain the proper grade. Now as I come around this radius, again I got to take my hand off to turn on my cross slope. I'm going to hit that return to straight button, which is an extremely nice feature on a motor grader. And I'm going to finish out this easy part on the neck, and we'll turn the time back to Clark.
Thank you very much, you guys. Great job there. So not only was this the most difficult job they could be asked to do, they talked the whole time they were doing it. Wonderful job.